Yeah, you sound clear. Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, good, good. I was like, they're gonna have another Steve take his spot.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. South Windsor Water Pollution Control Authority, October 5th regular meeting. Ethel, were you able to record who's here? You note that? For the record, there is a quorum. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right, we are meeting in the council chamber. Mr. Manfrey is joining us virtually, and he is fully connected and has a capable audio hookup, I trust.
Correct.
I'm glad you said that because I can't hear you nod. Okay, let's begin. Acceptance of minutes of our September 7th, 2021 regular meeting. They've been distributed. People have had a chance to review them. Are there any questions or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes.
There's a second? Okay, Sean has a second.
I second that.
Any additions, corrections, any commentary? There being none, call for a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes signify by raising a hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are accepted. Our second item is adoption of a decision and order stemming from a contested case where we sat as a hearing panel. That decision and order has been distributed to the members. They have an opportunity to review it. It has also been forwarded to the parties in the matter. I will ask at this time for a motion to approve the decision and order stemming from the contested case hearing on the appeal of Osprey Associates of the 2020 sewer use charges for 310 Nutmeg Road.
I move we adopt the decision in order regarding the sewer use charge appeal for 310 Nutmeg Road as provided as a draft here.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this matter?
That's not the motion.
For the benefit of our new member, though you weren't present for the hearing, technically you could vote on it. I would recommend an abstention because you weren't there for it. Okay. The other members were present. There is no further discussion on this. All those in favor of adopting the decision and order as written, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. We have that recorded. We are on to our next item of business, the miscellaneous industrial user general permit policy, seeking an approval. And for that, I am going to turn to our superintendent, Mr. Manfrey, to begin the discussion.
All right. Thank you. So as most of you are aware, the WPCA created an MIU subcommittee, and this was in response to DEP no longer administering the general permit for miscellaneous discharge industrial users. They pushed that onto the towns. Therefore, WPCA created an MIU subcommittee to address the issue of how this is going to be handled. The committee began meeting in April, and we've come up with a document which is in your packets. We have a policy that we put together. Although with further discussion with Tom, we think that this should go into the regulations, just to make it part of the WPCA rules and regulations, is section 17. In order to do that, we'd have to go to a public hearing and then adopt it the following month. So it'd be November would be the public hearing, and we could vote on approving it and adopting it into the regulations in December. So we'll just walk through briefly what the document says, and then I can follow up with any questions and comments. So the front end here, first page, deals with the authority that we have, and it also goes into the qualifying discharges, outlines the group 1 and group 2 users, and it goes into further detail with that on page 2 and 3. We also dealt with the effluent limits. We outlined that so the dischargers will know what category they fall in and what constituents they should be testing for, and then what those limits are. We included table 3.1, which is on page 4. And we tried to make this as clear as possible because it is a lot of information. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. So we're trying to make this as clear as possible and make this as administrable as possible. So we also went into the monitoring and reporting requirements. And that brings us on to page 5. This table here, table 4.1, this is pulled out of the DEP regulations from the former general permit, and we've instituted that here. I did receive a comment that it would be nice to have this cleaned up here, so I'm going to work on cleaning this up. It's going to have the same information. I'd like to clean that up and just, especially the 1,000, like on the second line there, 1,000 gallons per day is less than or equal to the flow, less than 10,000 gallons. So that sort of stuff, that'll all be cleaned up. We also dealt with the WPCA authorities and obligations, just so that the MIUs will understand where this document is going to be found. We also dealt with the due dates. Permit fees is something that we need to get into this evening. The subcommittee decided on a two permit fees, a $100 application fee, which is going to be proposed tonight, and also a $100 annual renewal fee. The fees were based on, I guess start with the application fee. That was dealt on based on the estimated amount of hours and the cost it will take to accept the permits, review the permits, file them, and deal with any mailings, any follow-up legwork that may be required, any inspections that may need to take place. But that's kind of an idea of, that's the number we fell on. That's about the cost it'll take to administer the program, to accept them. The $100, the annual fee for the renewal, that's based on the DEP's existing $500 permit fee, which lasts, it's a 5-year permit. So that's consistent with what the DEP was charging the industrial users prior to us being responsible to handle them. So we just broke that into an annual fee instead of $500 for 5 years. And that's basically for administration. It's much easier to administer each year instead of keeping, taking the $500 and then we have to document that and track it for 5 years and have a trigger to rebill the industrial user. So That's why we're proposing a $100 application fee and then a $100 annual renewal fee. So moving on to page 7, parts 8, 9, and 10 deal with the reporting requirements, reporting violations, and enforcement actions. And that outlines what if the MIU understands that they had violated part of the permit, that they need to, the steps they need to follow to comply with the permit and let the receiving wastewater facility know that they had violated. So it's the communication process and how it's reported, and then the corrective actions. So that's really a quick walkthrough of the document. There was there's 2 more edits that we do, revisions that I do need to make. Section 11 on page 8, it says this policy is hereby issued on October 31st. The October 31st, 2020 was when the MIU general permit was released by DEEP. So this language is going to have to be corrected to, I guess, the adoption date of this document.
Can you hear
And
me? Tony?
Yes?
Hi, it's Vicky. So what was that revision request for the October, because we're
The
in line with the
request
Connecticut
was-
DEP one.
I'm sorry, it was on page 8.
Right, but, oh, am I doing?
Number 11 says this policy is hereby issued on October 31st, 2020. The request
Your mic's
was,
not on. There you go.
Oh, thanks, sorry. So that's in alignment with the Connecticut DEP, that cannot be changed.
yes, so should it be revised to the general permit is hereby issued?
Turn your mic off. No. There, when the light's
Okay,
on.
it's kind of hard to push. Okay, sorry. It's in alignment with the Connecticut DEP. So the 31st of October is the issuance date with the expiration of the 30th at 2025.
I'm sorry, I lost some of that when you looked away. You can speak into the mic, but yes, that is part of the DEP.
Right, so what was
Language.
what was the language that someone was requesting to change on that?
That the policy is accepted the date that that the authority approves it.
Oh, okay, got you.
And then there was one minor revision it was on page 1. Number 1, authority. Connecticut state law requires all discharges of wastewater. It's gonna, I'll revise that to read all dischargers of wastewater to obtain a permit. So those were the 3 recommended revisions that I received. So I can take any questions, or we can have comments, conversation.
Mr. Chair?
Okay, before we get to the questions, I want to congratulate Tony and Vicky and Carol for the amount of work they put into bringing this to fruition. There were many meetings, and they were able to translate a relatively complex DEP directive into layman's terms that can be understood. It also serves us well in terms of administrability of the policy. That said, let me begin opening things to any questions from the members. And I'll begin on my left and work across. Toby?
Hey,
would you
Tony,
begin?
it's Toby. My question is, by the way, I echo the sentiments of our chair. Thank you, committee members, for this laborious task. Is it as in everything, we've tried to minimize increasing costs to citizens and to users and to minimize it. And does the $100 annual renewal seems like it goes on forever, and albeit an administrative nuisance, wouldn't it be possible to suspend that after so many years? We don't need to. It seems to be excessive to keep charging somebody just because the EEP does $500 fee, and so we'll charge $100, break it down to smaller biteable sizes. But it seems like, do we need to charge $100 every year continually?
Well, that's to recoup our costs as well. We're trying, obviously, to minimize. Yeah, I do understand, and I agree that we do try to minimize fees onto our users. But at the same time, we do have to recoup our costs. So when we start breaking down what it's going to take to administer the program, that was the number we landed on. It was about $100 worth of value to administer this. We're not trying to make money off this program, so to speak. We're just trying to recoup costs.
Right, if I can jump in, I manage 6 industrial wastewater permits for the facilities that I work at, and we're under the state permit, individual permits right now. Some of those can be MIUs, some of them have to be SIUs, and we spend $8,000 a year for each one of those permits. So asking for $100 is not unreasonable. We also reached out to some of the other towns, and the thing that's very interesting about the MIU and Connecticut DEP's support of it is basically they're leaving the towns to manage it themselves. The Connecticut DEP does not have any involvement. The only involvement is if there's any pollution to the navigable waters of the U.S. at that point in time. So we kind of solicited and tried to really thoughtfully try to figure out how do we recoup the funding that we would need to exhaust to sustain the permits. And asking $100 a year to us was very reasonable, considering I spend $8,000 a discharge right now under the state guidelines, under the state permits right now. Just some info.
I appreciate that. I'm just not, I never like for myself the reason because everyone else does it or because other people do that. Is if we need it, we need it, and that's reason. And by the way, I'm sure $100 fee is not going to cover our costs. I'm sure because our costs are much higher than that. So it's.
Well, that's the cost to administer the program. So that's receiving the notification, the billing, the filing, the review time of each notification and application. So yeah, I mean, it could be, so some applications are going to be much bigger, may require some more time, or there may be some more questions, or maybe there haven't been some, proper sampling that we need additional sampling for the wastewater, that sort of thing. There might be some applications where it's just pretty cut and dry and we get it and file it. So, I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a moving target, but, again, and it's a new program that we're trying to administer. So
Right. And
we just,
I don't want to hold you guys hostage.
also-
If I'm the only one that's concerned about it, then it's not an issue.
If I may, Tony, this fee would be set every year when we set the budget, would it not?
correct. Yes, we review it each year.
So when we prepare our budget and set our schedule of fees, this would be among them?
Correct.
So if at that time we wanted to adjust it downward or upward, that would be within our normal business operations.
It's correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
If I may?
Vicki, please.
One concern too that we had when we were thinking of how to best manage this, how to best put a price point on it, by not putting any price point, would make the permittee be more lax on their obligations under the permit. If I don't pay an annual fee, I'm not really going to care about my obligations under the guidelines that we have issued here in the permit. So we wanted to not price point people out. However, we did want to make them aware that you are still under the guidelines of the permit by issuing that annual fee. So that's basically where it is. There are obligations we do have. We do have the opportunity to do inspections of the sites, which would cost the town more. Like Tony said, it is a new, there's gonna be a lot of growing pains with this because the Connecticut DEP is not assisting the management of this. So $100 we felt was a very good start for this permit.
Okay, thank you. Toby, or?
No, I'm done. I shared some of my piece. Thank you.
You're all set?
Yeah.
Sean, you're good? Stevens next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a number of randomly different questions. So first of all, this is issued as a policy or it looks like a policy which is different from our regulations. Why isn't it formatted as chapter X point X in our regulations?
Hey, Tony?
Because initially it was going to be, the thought was to have it as a policy. But through recent discussions with the chairman, we determined that it was probably better to have this in the regulations, just to give it a little more backbone. And I thought there was something in our regulations that covered, I felt it did, but after reviewing it with Tom, or with the chairman, I apologize, yeah, we felt that it was just better to put it in as part of the regulations.
Okay, Vicki, you want to add to that?
Yeah, actually, this is the regulation here. This is it. It's very, very complicated. It's a lot of lawyer language. So we decided to put it into a policy because it would be simpler for the user. So this is basically like a cookbook version of this.
So when you say, excuse me, when you say that's a regulation, you're talking about a South Windsor regulation that you have, or is that the state?
This is the state of Connecticut MIU.
Okay,
That's
so.
it. Very, very complicated.
And I'm of course talking about putting it in the South Windsor regulation, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right, so we try to figure, how do we make this madness into something where people can use? And that's what we did. Actually, if you look at the very back here of the document, you'll see a chart of all the violation requirements on how to best report that. And it's pages and pages and pages of lawyer language that we put in a chart just so we could use it. So that's why we decided to put in a policy so we all could understand it and use it that way, like a cookbook. This is what you need to do, and this is the requirements.
If I may, I think the thrust of Stephen's comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, and Tony's response was that we want to take this policy and turn it into one of our regulations.
Yes.
Adopt it as a regulation of the South Windsor Water Pollution Control Authority.
Right.
And I think it deserves that based on its breadth and depth, that it should be laid out in a more formal manner, not just as a policy.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think as a manner, just looking ahead to proceed, we can adopt this as a policy this evening and move forward with adopting it with appropriate adjustments to be a regulation of the authority.
Agreed, because the MIU is not going away. It was basically a cheap way for the state just to manage all the individual permits. The state was overwhelmed with individual wastewater permits. So what they did is gave those that were a smaller miscellaneous type of permitted facility the opportunity to have an MIU, which is less obligations, and give those to the towns. They'll manage the big boys.
Okay.
So that's basically where it is. So this is not going away. So I think it, as part of our, beyond a policy, what were you saying, part of our regulations of the town, that I'm sorry, I misunderstood you, Steve.
Thank you. And Stephen, back to you.
Yeah. How are these users different from other industrial and commercial users?
How are the MIUs? It's
Yeah.
based on volume. And the larger volume industrial wastewater discharges have the thing called the SIU, which are like Pratt & Whitney's bigger foundations that discharge larger quantities of navigable waters of the U.S.
So would that include what we might consider commercial businesses that happen to make this kind of discharge, like, I don't know, a laundry storefront, you know, or a restaurant?
I'm sorry. This particular one is for industrial users. Commercial users are under a different one. I do not believe I believe these are just for industrial users for the MIU. The commercial ones, it all depends upon the SIC code, which is based on a 4-digit number of what classifies your particular industry. So it depends upon volumes and the SIC codes, and I'd have to see each one of those to see if they qualify as quote as an industry under the Connecticut ruling, which is based on, that is in this MIU.
So someone like, I don't know, a car wash or a laundry that does dry cleaning, you'd have to look up that code to decide whether this applies to them?
See if they become defined as an industrial user.
Okay. Let me go to my next question. Oh, on page 7, item 10A, we have permission to enter all properties with the owner's consent. So I think, to me, it really ought to be, you know, at a time mutually agreeable to the town and the owner, because if they don't consent, then you can't go in. So just a nit on the wording there.
Right.
Yeah, that's out of the current regulations,
That's
or
right.
the South Windsor rules and regulations.
Yeah, I would just suggest maybe a little bit stronger authority to go in there. If they don't consent, what do, you know? I'll let you
Free country.
just take that under advisement.
That is a very good point, because
That's
we
where
do have the authority.
DEP has told the municipalities that they will back us up. What they're essentially looking for is effort on our parts to track down and do the investigation, get as far with the MIU as possible. And if they're not complying, or if they're not allowing us into the building, we can call DEP inspectors, and they have a little more, they carry a heavier bat. So they'll be able to assist us in that regard. So
I'll let you
we
take
can always
that
fall back on them.
comment under advisement. It seems like we ought to be able to demand we can go in. But and then on page 8, item 11, with the dates.
Excuse me, wait, can we still talk about that a little bit at that point
Okay,
before
sure.
we move on? Is that okay? Has anyone ever refused it? I mean, we're not a police state. We can't go in. You must let us in. This is a free country. There's got to be, we got to protect the freedoms. We're here to administer, and we're not here to legislate and to dictate to folks that you must let us in, or we got a battering ram.
If can I take that one, Tony?
Well-
Under the Connecticut DEP, which governs the MIU, there is language in reference to inspections that we do have accessibility. As long as they're under our MIU permit, we have partnered, and therefore we are your authoritative figure for that miscellaneous industrial users permit. So we do have the rights under the MIU to proceed on site, and it typically is announced or unannounced. It's
Right,
really
well, we
up
don't need
us.
to have a bully pulpit for it. We don't need that language. If it's already there, it can be implied, but it's not right.
But I'm sorry, why is that not right?
I disagree. We inspect for all kinds of things, and people have to put up with these inspections.
Right, if you're under the MIU permit, we're your authoritative figure to manage that and therefore we have the rights to come on site. And it's like the Connecticut DEP, they have the authority to come on sites for the individual permits. They come unannounced all the time.
Okay, can we go on? So we're going to have a date when this becomes effective rather than when it's issued. And then I'm asking, is there a gap here, or are we on that date taking over responsibility from the state? And I'm now on page 8, by the way. Have they stopped
We're already responsible.
Okay,
That, that was passed on to the towns, in April. We were the responsible parties, so this document is to help us organize and administer the program.
okay. So I don't know, I guess, Mr. Chair, I'll ask you if this is the wording we want. The policy's issued, but we're already responsible. Are we able to enforce relative to actions that took place prior to the effective date, for example? We should be able to, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat
If
the
there's
question?
something in here that violates the state policy that somebody's doing, like they're dumping silver into the water, but it was happening in September of 2021, you know, that's a,
So the state issued the general, they had the general permit, which Vicky had, and it started October 31st of 2020, but now they're passing that down to the towns to administer the program and receive the notifications of the MIUs in each town.
so maybe I would look at, what you're really saying is the policy has always been there, or at least since 2020.
The general permit has been there, yes.
And the administration is being taken over, and this is just our document, how we take it over. So maybe look at the wording of this paragraph. I don't want to try to.
Yes, we're required now to track who's in town, what they're discharging, and that's what the notification is. It's an application of sorts that kind of gives a description of the property owner, contacts, gives some details on their operation, and it's just general information for us to review. And you know, if we have any questions, we have contact information, addresses, type of manufacturing, and, you know, things of that nature.
And Steve, just to add, you are correct. It's really confusing. So what happened is the state issued this permit, both the MIU and SIU at the same time in October. However, they kept delaying and having facilities needing to apply and be active under this permit within a month of it. And industry actually rebelled against that because we couldn't get the permitting. The SIU requires a third-party PE, and it was a real mess. So they kept pushing it off all the way to April of 2021 for you to be under a permit. So you still were under the umbrella of a miscellaneous GP or an individual industrial permit until April of 2021 because you were grandfathered in. So after April 30th, I think, of 2021, you had to be under an MIU SIU period. So it was a grandfather period.
Okay, that's all I had, and this is an amazing document. Thank you for all that hard work.
Tony, if I may, just for a little clarification when it comes to context for our discussion this evening. I think this was asked in a prior meeting, but I'd just like to bring it up again. How many actual infractions under the deep administration of the MIUs are we actually, or were we talking about?
I couldn't hear. I'm sorry, could you repeat?
How many
Absolutely.
infractions?
Yeah, historically, how many infractions under the deep administration of the MIUs were we talking about?
Infractions.
They didn't share that information with me.
Are you?
What they did share was they gave us a list of past registrants. And they've also, they also sent out a letter to that list of registrants, stating that they need to notify the towns or the town that the business is located in now. as far as infractions go, I can't speak to that.
Right, it's up to the industrial users to really figure out what they need to do. Under the governance of the Clean Water Act, and if you discharge wastewater to a navigable water, you have to have a permit. So it was up to the facilities to determine if they wanted to keep their industrial permits, or actually go into an industrial permit if they're under a miscellaneous general permit, or become an MIU or a larger SIU. And they had to do that within that particular time frame, which was April. If they didn't have a permit, you were in violation of the Clean Water Act. So if that helps any?
No, but that's fine. So
Okay.
we're talking in the context of allowing people into their facilities, or the administration costs for us to take over from DEEP. And so I'm just trying to ascertain in a global sense what that work is, outside of just issuing the permit. So now if we have to uphold the MIUs with this this fine work you've done, I'm trying to get an idea as to what that work is. And
Oh, I
so
see.
it's post
Okay.
issuance of the
Oh,
permit.
I see. Past experiences of violations and things like that. Okay, got you. Yeah, we never got that. That is all public knowledge, public right to know. But we really never were. You were never issued any infractions of any of your people. No.
No, I haven't seen any.
You could look
Vicki,
at-
can you slide your mic more
Oh,
towards the
sorry.
center or speak
My
more
bad.
into it? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah,
Is-
I'm having
You keep
trouble
cutting
might
in
hearing.
and out. I hope I
actually-
haven't cut you off at all.
Also, there's an EPA website, so if you have violated the Clean Water Act, it is on there. It's called ECHO, ECHO, if you have if you have an interest in that. Every facility is registered under that, and it'll have all the infractions from all Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and that information would be there.
Thank you. So possibly, there aren't a lot of potential issues then when it comes to administering the MIUs, when it comes to either bad actors or enforcement. Doesn't seem like there's going to be much of an issue if it's not on anyone's radar right now.
Hard to say unless you do your homework on each one of your users through ECHO or directly through Connecticut DEP, contacting the Water Bureau. Hard to say.
Okay, I think we're up to Michael.
I still have, a couple of questions. So, Tony, on the table 3 monitoring parameters and the table 4 reporting frequency, do these represent any new, like a new burden, new requirements? Or is this just taking some, what I'm trying to understand is if this is extending and adding to work for the companies, or if this is just restating these requirements in our new document. In other words,
So
where'd you-
this, I'm sorry, table 3-1, this is a mix of, this covers more than what our regulations state. So what I did was I took the constituents that our regulations state with the limits, which are typically lower than the state limits. And then I took the state limits as well, because this graph came out of the state general permit. And I implemented the lower number into this graph. Because the general permit states that it's the lower of the two numbers, either the state or the municipality. So this graph is unique to South Windsor, although some of the numbers may be the same as state numbers, and some of them are the ones found in our rules and regulations.
Okay. So how about the frequency, reporting frequencies then? Table 4.
That came out of the general permit, so that's the state.
Here, let me try to restate it. I'm simply trying to understand if this is just putting some existing reporting parameters and frequencies into these regulations, and it doesn't represent any new work for the companies. That's what I'm trying to understand. Are we extending and adding some reporting burden to the companies they didn't have before this regulation came out?
No, this is generally
Okay.
what they should have been doing, and if there's any violations, they should have been reporting that.
Okay.
So this really isn't extending anything more onto the miscellaneous industrial users.
Right.
Okay,
If
good,
I-
good.
Right, if I can jump in, these are actually language directly from the
Can't hear you.
oh, sorry, they don't know what's up with this thing. This is language actually from the miscellaneous general permit and industrial, individual
Okay.
industrial permit, so they kind of married the two together for the MIU.
Good. That's all I was trying to understand. Then one last question, getting back to Toby's question. The reporting that's been going on, the DEP has some $500 permit, and they were requiring, I'm trying to understand the history of how we got burdened with this. They want us to do this work now, but it sounds to me like they've been collecting $500 and doing this work, and now they'd like to still collect the 500, keep it, and give us the work. Is that a fair statement?
It's actually,
No,
I believe that's a relatively fair assessment,
Oh, that's
and that the
disappointing.
state decided that it would be more appropriate for the municipal operators of treatment plants and collection systems to administer this program.
Sure, okay,
And that's how we got here today.
yeah, okay.
right, but you have to realize that those that were either on individual permits or under the miscellaneous GP, you're spending thousands of dollars to discharge to the state.
Yeah,
And this is actually a deal
yeah.
under
no,
the
I-
MIU.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole world of reporting out there that I don't yet understand. And so, yeah, I just want to understand how so we're expanding. I mean, this is essentially like an unfunded mandate. The state is saying, you go do this work, we're not, and you're going to have to go collect the money for it. It creates a new tax on the,
Well, it's one way to characterize it.
Right.
I think.
They took the burden off
I'm not saying
them.
we shouldn't do it, I'm just trying to properly understand it
Right.
in my head.
The burden is off them on the smaller users. So they only are managing the larger industrial users, discharge
Right.
or discharge.
Yeah, okay.
That's basically what it is.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Bill, do you have any questions or comments? You're all set?
You're asking me?
Do you have any questions or comments you
Oh,
wish to
yeah.
bring into the conversation?
I have a question about the timeline for, like you said, October, effective October, but in the sheet
Can you
here,
speak into the mic? I can't hear, apologize.
the timeline of the effectiveness, and also there is a time schedule that shows the public hearing and adopting. So how does that impact the existing MIUs, or are they going to have some kind of a notice period where they have to?
Is our timeline impacted? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
No, we are on task as of right now. The plan is to have the public hearing set for November 3rd. We'll have the public hearing, and then December 11th, that date doesn't sound right, but in December at the WPCA meeting, regular meeting, we'll vote, the authority will vote on how to proceed. And if it's adopted, we can put that into effect immediately or by January. So we are on task.
so essentially it's effective for 2022, the fees.
Microphone.
I didn't, can you repeat that? Sorry.
Effective from 2022, the fees payment by the existing MIUs? Is that correct?
Yeah, so, right, so the fees will be If we implement the fees, they'll go into effect either December or January. And then when WPCA votes on the fee schedule, there's a public hearing each May, and then there's a vote at the regular meeting in June, and that's with the budget. So typically, the budget is adopted with the fee schedule in June, and that'll go into effect July 1st of the
Right.
year.
And we were, and one thing too is we just wanted to give them one bill for everything instead of charging them now because they're already a user. We're waiting till next year to do that. So they'll be hit with an initial application fee and an annual user's fee at once. And then after that, it'll be annually.
Okay. And then I have a question
Correct.
about violations, right? The violations, there is a wording mentioned that we'll have to report to DEP, right? Is that like a regular reporting requirement or is by each occurrence?
Right, so.
Yeah, if there's a known violation, they're required to self-report. And then we'll work with them to make the correction, or they'll give us a corrective action plan.
Right, if you-
We work with a couple companies in town that are very good about reporting, and they typically understand what the issue was or something very obvious that caused the violation. So we'll just report it and then report the corrections that they made, and typically that's kind of the end of it. However, there have been instances where we may see something at the treatment plant through our sampling. And then we do have the ability to backtrack through the system if we continue to see it. And we can most times pinpoint it down at least to a small section. And then we can just drive through the area and see what businesses are in town. And then just kind of get a generalized idea. Also within our industrial properties, we do have monitoring manholes. There's easements when the properties were developed. So we can monitoring manholes where we can put a sampling hose into the manhole and sample the discharge that's going into the sewer pipe. So yeah, we can backtrack it. And if that is the case, that's when DEP can give us an assist as well. They said as long as, if we can get that far and then we start having issues with the user, that they'll back us up.
Right, and to add to that, if you want to go to page 9 of the document, there are also obligations for reporting violations. So to add what Tony is saying is those violators who decide not to report and actually are polluting our waters, if they're caught that way, we can actually backtrack to this chart you see here where you'll see if there's particular violations, who they have to report to and what the frequency is. And to be honest, this is very in-depth and extensive for a general permit. It's complex and it's something we're gonna have to keep our eye on. So if we're finding people are violating that part of the MIU, we haven't really issued what a violation would cost at this point, but there is language in here which is from the MIU in regards to how to report a violation and what violations are there and what is a violation, but it also includes reporting it to the Connecticut DEP dependent on the level of nonconformance.
Okay, thank you.
You're all set? Okay, any other, we have another question, go ahead.
Yeah, pardon me, again, for clarification, just because of a subsequent question that was brought up. So with the state now pushing this administration to the towns, are they still charging the $500 fee or are they forfeiting it?
Oh, they're forfeiting that $100 that or
Makes up.
initially is all ours. Yeah.
Very good, okay, that's what I thought, okay.
Oh yeah,
So,
no, there's no. That's ours. Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, concerns? If not, I'll call for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to hold a public hearing for a $100 miscellaneous industrial permit application fee and a $100 annual renewal fee prior to the next South Windsor Water Pollution Control Authority regular meeting on November 3rd.
That requires a second.
Second.
Second from Toby. You got that?
Um,
Any further discussion on the motion?
Well, yeah, actually, could we do a friendly amendment to that? And can we amend that that meeting be not here?
I can't hear you, Toby.
I'd like to say that before the annual, before our regularly scheduled meeting on November 3rd, at the water pollution facility.
I'm not hearing you.
The water pollution facility?
Well, wherever we're meeting.
Huh?
It would be wherever we're meeting.
I can't hear you.
I don't, we haven't set a place to meet yet for November 3rd.
Well, that's what I'm trying to put in there.
We can
Okay,
reach that.
okay.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the policy as a policy. It's been seconded. We're adopting, the public hearing on the fee, okay?
He read this.
Okay. All those in favor?
Well,
Aye.
wait a minute. I heard a friendly amendment. I don't know what
There
happened to it.
wasn't, the friendly amendment went nowhere. There
Okay,
was no
so
friendly
that's
amendment.
gone, right? Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
We good? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the public hearing is set for November 3rd prior to our next regular meeting.
May I interject now, though, however? Communications are very difficult here, and so can we discuss meeting somewhere else?
We can, but not at this point in the agenda. Okay, I'll make room at the end for that.
Thank you.
Now, that said, Stephen raised I think, a very valid point in that this is so comprehensive that it perhaps deserves to be incorporated into our regulations as such. So at this point, I would ask Tony to begin putting together this policy in the form of a regulation for our adoption. And we would begin to consider that also at our November meeting. Are you able to hear me?
Yes,
Okay. And are
I
you
heard
able?
some of it.
Will you be able to begin that process to
For implementing
rework
into the
policy
regulation?
into the form of a regulation for our adoption?
Sure, yes.
Okay. And that will come on November 3rd.
Now, do we need to have this as a policy for some reason in the meantime, or can we wait to do it as a regulation?
Well, we haven't adopted anything yet because the public hearing is November 3rd.
But the public hearing is just for the fee.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're pointing at.
Well, this is the motion that,
I don't believe that's the motion as it was stated. I think it was stated somewhat differently.
Would you like me to reread it?
Yeah, why don't you reread it, please?
I'll reread the motion. The motion stated was as follows: a motion to hold a public hearing for a $100 miscellaneous industrial permit application fee and a $100 annual renewal fee prior to the next South Windsor Water Pollution Control Authority regular meeting on November 3rd.
okay, so we got the fee, but we don't have the policy. That was my point. And do we need a motion to adopt the policy, or do we want to wait
No,
until we make it into a
We can
regulation?
simply adopt the fee. We have the authority to set our own fees.
Yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
we
we
did
did
a
that.
public hearing, we're trying to put it into
Policy
our
doesn't-
regulations.
Hang on just a second.
This is not a policy of our authority yet, because we haven't voted to adopt it.
I see where you're going with this. So this is my question. Do we need to have a motion to adopt it before the public hearing, or must we have a public hearing on the fees in that motion to adopt the miscellaneous, the MIU, general permit policy?
Okay.
That's my question.
A policy is just that. It is the policy of the authority to do this.
And who issues the
You know,
policy?
well, the staff has developed the policy and, you know, we've just reviewed it. Moving it toward a regulation will be something that will require our further involvement and put teeth behind it.
So you're telling me the staff can adapt policies without our approval?
No. And, hang on.
Well,
Okay, Sean?
Well, before I read this motion in, I have a question. So before adopting a motion for the MIU general permit policy, my question is, should we have the public hearing on the fees regarding that general policy? Or are we comfortable adopting the general permit policy and having the discussion with the public hearing on the fees subsequent to adopting it?
I think we should adopt the policy.
What is the sense of the body?
I think we need to adopt the policy, and my only second question would be, do we need to hold a public hearing to adopt the policy?
No, we don't. We don't need a public hearing for a policy. We need a public hearing for a regulation or a fee. Okay.
So I'll read in the motion. So I'd like to propose a motion to adopt the miscellaneous industrial user general permit policy as presented by the Water Pollution Control Authority's MIU subcommittee.
That requires a second.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we now have a policy and a public hearing. We are on to the next item of our agenda, item C3, discussion item brought forward by Mr. Wagner.
Okay, so
I hope you can explain this to me, because
you all have a rather long document that's labeled Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments Public Act, and I won't read all the numbers here, Public Act number 2129, outline and summary. And there are two sections in there that are highlighted in yellow because most of this document deals with zoning. But there's two little sections in here that deal with water pollution control authorities. And in particular, the section on page 2 that's highlighted deals with accessory dwelling units, which could be in-law apartments, or somebody just decides they want to rent out a space in their house and they build it out, they put a kitchen in, they make sure it has a bathroom, and it now becomes like a little apartment inside their house. That's an accessory dwelling unit. And now the part that is not highlighted, but on that same page, page 2, talks about implementation of potential municipal action. And the municipality, if we don't take any action, this thing basically overrides, this law overrides all of our regulations. So we are required to adopt regulations consistent with this law, all through the zoning and everything. But if we don't, then every other regulation that disagrees with it becomes null and void. There's a second little circular bullet there that says there is an opt-out process for the as-of-right accessory apartment legislation. So there is the possibility that this town will choose to opt out of this. And in order to do that, you actually have to have like a supermajority on the Planning and Zoning Commission and a supermajority in the council. My sense of where things are going is that we will opt out, but not to go against the regulation, but to provide some fine points that we think might be good. We, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then would make a recommendation to the council. So, first of all, there are two sections in the regulations in the zoning regulations that deal with accessory apartments and another section on in-law apartments. Now this is all getting collapsed into accessory apartments. So I'm going to hand out two documents to each of you. So that take one and pass it on. Likewise, take one and pass it on. There's one extra here for Ether. And Tony, there's an email that you probably just received an hour ago that has these same documents attached to it, if you have access to your computer. Tony? Tony's frozen. Okay. So let's talk about, first of all, the requirement that's highlighted here. We cannot consider an ADU to be a new residential use for the purpose of calculating our connection fees or our capacity charges. It doesn't talk about user fees, but it talks about the connection fee and the capacity charges, including water, sewer service, unless the dwelling was constructed with a new dwelling on the same lot. So accessory dwelling units can be part of your house. You could put one in your basement if you wanted, for example. But they could also be a separate building on the same lot. If you have a big enough lot to put another building out there, you can do that. And there are limits about the size and so on. But so this language here deals with the option that someone would have to build a separate building. Or maybe they take a barn and modernize it and turn it into a house, okay? Or require the installation of a new or separate utility connection to an ADU or impose related connection fee or capacity charges. So the whole idea of this is to make it easy to develop affordable housing by this mechanism of accessory development dwelling units. So I gave you a document that has the word draft in the upper left corner. And this is not the current regulation, but the draft that's been prepared by Michelle Leip, our town planner, after a discussion with planning and zoning. And basically this defines what an accessory development would look like, or an accessory apartment. There's some language in red which is taking exception to the law, but basically this is adopting the intent of the new law. Our old regulation did not. So one area that might be a subject of discussion is a requirement 1 here, A1, shall be owner occupied. That could present some difficulties if the owner is living in one of the two units and then passes away or moves out to a nursing home or something. Do they have to change the building, or what do they have to do? So that's the kind of thing we'll be discussing in planning and zoning. But for our purposes, we need to go through our regulations and make sure that we can live with, or we are properly complying with this law. So the second document I passed out to you is a section, several pages from our own regulations. And I highlighted some areas that might now be ambiguous now that we're thinking about this. Okay, like the definition of a dwelling unit, one or more rooms providing complete living facilities for one or more individuals, blah, 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 blah. So that means that the accessory dwelling unit is a dwelling unit. Now that affects our regulations and how we charge, okay? On 175, a residential unit is a dwelling for one family only. So we'll have to make sure someone will have to go through these regulations and make sure when we say a residential unit, we're properly addressing accessory development dwelling units, which probably means we're going to have to add a definition or two in here and get that clarified. 184, 1.84, capacity fees are one-time payments. So if you now put an ADU in your house, you're not allowed to increase the capacity fee unless it's a separate building. The lateral, you're not allowed to require a lateral for the 2 units. And probably not a problem for us. I don't think we'd want to do that anyway. And then on 3.4, each house, building, or other structure used for human occupancy is a use that we have to consider. And there's more things I've highlighted here, how we calculate fees and everything, but I just think that this is an area that, you know, we can't tonight make sure and clean up all the language and make sure it's right, but I think it's an area we need to work on. Which is pretty much all I had to
Okay, well, thank
offer,
you.
except to answer questions. And Tony also knows a lot about this subject.
Okay, thank you for that, Stephen. Tony, you're at a bit of a disadvantage in that you don't have the handouts, but I'm sure we'll get them to you when you return to work or sooner.
Well, I actually emailed them to him.
He has it on his
And,
computer.
Yeah,
What I would like you-
I do have them.
Okay.
I've been kind of scrolling through them.
can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay. What I would like you to do is meet with the town planner, go over these materials, determine if there's any impacts that we have to pay attention to, and report back to us in November. Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments on this matter?
Not at this time.
Okay, we are moving on to the superintendent's report and the annual report. Tony, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. You know, notes. All right. All right, so the annual report was submitted to the town manager's office. See, the first page here is, this is for fiscal year 2021. It's end of the year report. So we submitted for the Water Pollution Control Division and also the Water Pollution Control Authority. The WPC Division report highlighted the treatment process numbers, the Ellington Road Force Main Project, pump station upgrade status, and the Chapel Road Phase 2 construction project of relining sewer pipe. There was one revision that was made to this, and it's a number that was updated. This document in your hand that you're looking at says 8,587 residential connections. The number is actually 8,593. So that was one revision that will be different. So I just wanted to give the advanced copies to you, but that number has changed. As far as the WPCA report, this year I've highlighted efforts to offset electrical costs, the authority's 10-year capital improvement plan, the operating and capital budget. We also highlighted the second, I apologize, Chairman Roby also highlighted the second consecutive year without a user fee increase, reserve fund balances, and approvals and income eligible discount program. So this is advanced copy that will be going into the town's annual report that I want to provide to the authority. And that concludes, take any comments.
You're all set? Okay. You want to go into the superintendent's report?
I'm sorry,
did you
we're
just finish
good
it?
to move on to superintendent?
Yes.
Tony, can you hear me?
Superintendent's report?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Cut up. All All right, one thing I did want to bring up with the authority, just so everybody is aware. Last year, as we were planning on doing the clean water funds for the pump station projects, there was not a cap for the amount of money that we could borrow. So that's what kind of pushed the plan to apply or submit for all 3 pump stations for the clean water fund loans. Put it in as one project because it's going to exceed the $4 million that that they initially had on that program. It was removed last year. This year's list, they reapplied the cap to the loan program. So what that means for us is instead of viewing this as one project, we're going to have to do it either as 3 individual projects, 3 different years, or do one project. And if we can get 2 pump stations done for under $4 million, then we can apply those 2 as one project. So I did want to make everyone aware of that, of those changes. Also, we did the residential sewer billing this month. The billing list has now increased to 8,648 accounts. There was 196 accounts that qualified for the income eligible discount program. The total billing list, total revenue billed this month or this year was $3,569,228.25. Also, the ClearGov website is now up and running. The ClearGov website is going back to the ARPA funding, but we're also going to be using that for town projects for residents to be able to view and follow. If you get a chance, this is a snip from the town webpage. And IT did add the little button on the bottom right. I tried to highlight it. It's not really popping out from the agenda here, but on the bottom right, it does say ARPA CIP projects. So if you get a chance, you can view that. I've updated 2 of the projects. The Clark Street bypass valve project hasn't been loaded up yet, but as soon as that's prepared, I'll make that live. And as the projects progress, I'll be updating the website here. Moving on to the treatment plant and collection systems. Our process numbers are starting to stabilize a little bit with the lack of rainfall, or less rainfall, I should say. We're still seeing some rain. We continue to keep up with our preventive maintenance. There were some repairs that were made over throughout the treatment plant. However, we are doing well in the maintenance department. As far as the collection system, we were having some camera issues, and that's why you'll see, this is in July, our inspection camera has since been repaired, and we also had a issue with the pump on our combination jet truck. So our CCTV and our cleaning have been down as of late, but we have those repaired, and those numbers should be going up next month. There was a repair made at the Clark Street pump on pump number 3. And then we've been doing some more, we've tried to focus some of our concentrated efforts at the Clark Street watershed areas for our inspections and cleaning. Just because with these high rainfalls in June and July and August, it really amplified the amount of infiltration that we have in the system. So that's one area we're going to start concentrating on and try to fortify over the coming years. Our capital improvement projects, the pump station upgrades, we discussed the clean water fund changes. Our engineer continues with the design process. Phase 4, parts 1 and 2, These have not been bid yet, but I just wanted to outline our timeline for the project. The bid specs have already been completed to the 90% portion. We do need to update those. And so part one was budgeted for in this current year as a capital improvement project. And part two was approved with the ARPA funds last week. So we're going to be bidding them as one project, but we're going to be keeping funds separate so we don't intermingle funds and make it confusing. And as far as the ARPA reporting goes, but as far as the contractor's concerned, it's going to be one project, and we are anticipating to bid that in November. And construction, we're hoping will begin in January with completion by March. Also with the Clark Street bypass valve, we're expecting to bid that project in November. I'm not 100% sure on when the construction can begin. We called around looking for, it's called a line stop valve. It's 16-inch. And what we've heard, there's a 3 to 6 month lead time on the parts. So we want to get that bid as soon as possible so we can get that project going as quickly as possible. So that's, did I miss? Oh, and the UV disinfection, I apologize. Thought I missed one. So we're planning to hire an engineer by December for the design portion of the project. Design work will begin as soon as the engineer is hired. The project's expected to be bid in late November, and we have to work around our DEP discharge permit. We're required to run the UV system up through September, and we can begin the project as soon as October 1st. So that's our intent. So that's October 1st of 2022. So this project's a year out, but if we can get all the legwork done up front, we'll be prepared for the October downtime when the system's off and we can install the new system. And moving on to the collector of revenue report. Excuse me. So the commercial collection rate is at 98.77%, and the residential collection rate is at 99.15%. And that's for the 2021 grand list. As I said, residential billing went out this past month, so that number will be reset, and anyone past this will be delinquent, and she'll be working on those delinquencies. There was also the tax sale, which brought in some sewer revenue. This was in late August. I mentioned last meeting that I would bring a number in revenue from the tax sale, and she had collected $9,296.33 in sewer revenue from the tax sale. And that concludes the superintendent report. I can take any questions.
Are there any questions for Tony?
Yeah. Under the UV disinfection upgrade, you said construction will take place after October 1 when disinfection is no longer required. I didn't understand what's going on there.
Correct. We're required to run the UV and disinfect wastewater until, our effluent wastewater until September. As soon as October comes, we shut the system down, and then that's when we do our main repairs. So we're constricted to doing the work within that time frame.
Is that a kind of a temporary suspension of the requirement to allow us to do the work? Is that the idea?
No, for something like this, they can get it, excuse me, we can get the work done between October and May. May we're required to run the system again. So it's May to October is our disinfect.
Oh, this
sorry,
is because
May
of the
through
this
September
is
is our-
a seasonal thing.
Yes, that's
Oh, okay.
our required disinfection season.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Any further questions for Tony? Okay, there being none, we move on to item E, public participation. We have a couple of items to come up. Stephen, you received a communication from a resident who wanted to bring something to our attention.
Yes, and I didn't bring that with, but it was basically requesting that we adopt a sewer user fee based on water usage. The resident commented that there are only 2 people living in the dwelling. Of course, this is an item that we've discussed at length several times over the past 5 or 6 years, but that was the input from the resident.
Well, yes, the issue has been raised and discussed at least 3 times since I've been on the authority. But why don't we do this? If we forward that communication to Mr. Manfrey, Tony, would you please review it, draft an appropriate response, and contact the resident and provide the response?
Yeah, I believe you already have
Do you
it.
hear any of that?
Yes, I can develop a response for the resident.
Okay. All right, thank you. And Toby, you had something you wanted to raise?
Yeah, I want us to discuss not meeting here. And I realize that that we want to be sensitive to social conditions, but at the same time, you know, I don't know. It seems weird that we got to mandate everyone to get vaccinated, but then we still got to wear masks, and we can't hear each other in a meeting with glasses all over, and so it's difficult in this location. So if other members are agreeable, I'd recommend we meet somewhere else, and I know that it worked pretty well last month when we were at the water pollution facility, and that seemed to be good. So, but before I made a motion, I'd rather see if there's a consensus.
Thank you for raising that, and I will open it to the membership to comment. And let's go left to right. Sean?
I would certainly support discussing, or I do support discussing meeting somewhere where we can do our work in an easier environment to communicate. This is challenging, and so I would support meeting somewhere else.
Stephen?
So I'm wondering why we're meeting here in the first place. I think it has to do with being able to have, in this case, Tony Manfrey attend in a virtual format, and other boards are doing the same thing. I also meet here on planning and zoning. I agree. I have a hard time understanding a lot of the people, especially female voices. Believe it or not, for me, I don't know why that is. Probably because I'm getting older and my higher pitch hearing is going away. But yeah, and these things, these barriers we have between us, make it more difficult. Oftentimes there are presentations and they're off to one side and you're looking through 3 or 4 panes of plexiglass to try to see it. So I'd be more comfortable somewhere else for this group, but I understand that staff may have reasons for asking us to meet here. So I'll leave it to that discussion.
Okay, Michael, you're the new fellow on the block, and this is your first meeting. This is your only experience, so, you know, please.
I share people's dislike for the room. I can't really add a great deal, except that wherever we go, we do need to make sure, like the water pollution control facility, can we do a Zoom meeting there if it's needed? You know, we don't want to shut somebody out because
Speak to the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to shut somebody out because, we can't do a Zoom meeting from that room or something. Mm-hmm. But I would certainly support going to another room, and wherever the best place is will work for me.
That's ironic, because I had suggested a while ago that we go back to the Zoom meeting if we had to meet here, and then I was told we can't. We have to meet somewhere, and yet, here we are.
Bella, you're up.
I think somewhere else will be better. This is my first meeting, so I'm kind of a little bit combination of that and the communication hearing, and I think last meeting was much better.
Okay. Vicky, do you care to weigh in?
Yeah, I agree. This has been a bit challenging to hear people, and so my preference would be not here. I guess my second preference would be the maiden room, as long as we have masks on. I wasn't at the water pollution meeting when we was on site. The only thing I would request is still masks because of the state mandate, but also for health reasons. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, wherever we meet, we're going to be obligated to continue to meet the protocols for public health. That certainly won't go away. And I share your concerns about difficulty in clearly hearing everything that is said. While I may hear people, I'm not sure I'm catching all the words or the nuance of what they're saying. Now, at our next meeting, we scheduled a public hearing, and we're not going to be in this room next month. So is your preference to go back to the treatment plant? Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, well, some of you aren't
That's-
familiar with it, but the room is large enough and it has worked in the past. We met there in September and conducted a contested case hearing, and that seemed to go very well. So the November meeting is the consensus to have the November meeting at the treatment plant?
I support that.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and in the meantime, let's hope that alternative arrangements can be developed that are more conducive to our needs.
Yeah, just make sure that that doesn't turn it into a special meeting. If it does, then you're strictly limited to what's on the agenda.
Special meeting and what?
Well, you're moving the location and it's not an emergency situation.
Meeting's not specified, meeting location isn't specified in the regulations.
No,
Just
but
a
it is,
date.
we did announce our schedule of meetings at the beginning of the year, I believe, and all the other boards and commissions do.
I don't think it indicated where we were meeting.
Well, you might want to check that.
But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll post whatever is necessary with the town clerk, make sure we comply with all things necessary. And I guess our next meeting is going to be at the treatment plant. So with that, is there any other business to conduct?
Just one. I'd like to make a motion to close.
No.
Is there a second?
I have
Let's give Mike the second. It's his first
I'll
meeting.
second.
Okay, get him into the minutes. There's been a motion to adjourn and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your participation. Tony, thank you for participating as best you can from a distance. I hope you're feeling better soon.
I am feeling better, thank you, and I apologize, I can't be there live, and I followed along as best I could, so I apologize for some of the glitchy moments, but
Be well, Tony.
we'll get there. You too, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Thank you, Don.